Welcome to another episode of Pick 3 DST, where I give you 3 defenses I like, 1 defense I'm fading, and 1 defense I'm stashing ahead of Week 9 of the NFL season. As a reminder, these are not my full weekly DST rankings. If you want to check those out, you can click the link below, which will take you to the article that I update as the week goes on. We get weather concerns and injury updates and things of that nature. As always, we're going to start with our accountability check, and it was a pretty poor week for our video picks. I did get 6 of the top 10 defenses right in my weekly rankings article, so that's just another plug to check that article as the week goes on. However, there were a few misses here in our video picks. The biggest miss, of course, was the Atlanta Falcons, who put up a goose egg in what looked like a really strong spot against the Miami Dolphins. We also missed on our solid defense, the Houston Texans, who put up 5 points and finished 13th on the week, which isn't terrible, but isn't really what we were hoping for. However, if we missed on our pick for the Texans, then we did hit on fading the Green Bay Packers, who were consensus ranked inside the top 10, but they also finished with 5 points, so outside of the top 10, just like the Houston Texans. And then my sleeper defense was the Minnesota Vikings, and they finished 18th on the week. However, I did move the Vikings down to my 13th ranked defense once it was announced that Joe Alt was going to surprisingly suit up for the Los Angeles Chargers. So just another reminder to check the rankings as the week goes on, because things do shift with those injury reports when they update during the week. My sleeper defense for the week is the Jacksonville Jaguars. Consensus has them at 10th, and I have them up at 3rd. Now, you can tell from those rankings that there aren't really a lot of sleeper picks this week, given the matchups and bye weeks, but the Jaguars are a team that I am much higher on than consensus, so they are my pick this week. Over the last 6 weeks, the Jaguars are 7th in opponent scoring rate, 9th in turnover rate, and 12th in EPA per play allowed. That's expected points added per play allowed, so they are a solid defense. They only have 2 weeks on the season that they've scored under 7 fantasy points, and those were against the Seahawks and the Rams. The Raiders offense is not the Seahawks and the Rams. Over the last month, the Raiders give up 11 fantasy points to opposing defenses. Geno Smith leads the NFL right now with 10 interceptions, and this Raiders offense as a whole is dead last in the NFL in turnover rate. So I think the Jaguars are going to be able to make a few big plays in this game, and so I do like them as a play this week. My solid defense of the week is the Green Bay Packers. Consensus has them up at 3rd, but I have them down at 8th on the week. This Packers play reminds me a little bit of the Bengals matchup last week, where we ranked the Bengals aggressively because of their matchup. We're kind of doing that also for this Packers defense, who's really disappointed, and they've averaged just 4 fantasy points per game over the last 6 weeks. They rank 9th in the NFL in conversion rate allowed over the last 6 weeks, and that's the only stat that I think is meaningful that they finish near the top 10 in. So this is a defense that hasn't really produced fantasy goodness for us. However, I think they can sneak inside the top 10, and the reason I think it's not exactly like the Bengals situation is because even though the Packers defense has not delivered for fantasy, they have been a solid real-life defense. On the season, they are 1st in the NFL in yards allowed per play. They are 3rd in the NFL in rushing yards allowed per game, and they're 12th in defensive EPA allowed. So they've been a solid overall defense, and they're going up against a Panthers offense that lost 3 starting offensive linemen last week. And so I think this is a situation where you get a pretty mediocre fantasy defense, but a good real-life defense, unlike the Bengals, who are a bad real-life defense and also a bad fantasy defense, in a matchup that is probably a little bit better than we'd like to think because of injuries. And so I don't love this Packers play. I can't put them inside my top 5, but I do think they're a top 10 play this week. Before I get to my stud defense of the week, pause this video, comment below, let me know which defense you're playing this week, or ask me any start-sit questions, and I'll get to those as the week goes on. My stud defense of the week is the Los Angeles Rams. Consensus has them at 2nd, and I have them up at 1st on the week. The Rams are coming off the bye and in a really good matchup against the Saints. Over the last 6 weeks, the Rams are 2nd in the NFL in pressure rate, 3rd in the NFL in opponent scoring rate, 5th in conversion rate allowed, 9th in EPA per play allowed, and 12th in turnover rate. They're going up against the Saints offense. It's going to have Tyler Shuck at quarterback, most likely. He didn't look like much of an upgrade on Spencer Rattler when he came in starting in the 3rd quarter of that last week game. So I don't really think that this is a situation where the Saints offense gets any noticeable bump. Alvin Kamara did injure his ankle in the game on Sunday. As of right now, we aren't expecting him to miss that game, but maybe he's not really 100%. And this is a Saints offense that over the last 4 weeks is giving up 9 fantasy points per game to opposing defense defenses, so they've gone from being just an average matchup to being a plus matchup for defenses. This Rams defense is a good defense. They've had 2 weeks to prep for this game. I expect them to come out swinging and put up a big score this week. The defense I'm fading for this week is the Baltimore Ravens. Consensus has them at 9th, and I have them down at 24th on the week. I just can't get there with this Ravens defense. I know people are saying the Dolphins offense can't possibly have 2 good games in a row. They've been a really poor offense throughout the season, but this Ravens defense isn't just mediocre. They've been really bad. Over the last 6 weeks, they average 0 fantasy points per game. That's 0 fantasy points per game. They, over that span, also rank 31st in the NFL in pressure rate, 31st in turnover rate, 31st in EPA per play allowed, and they are dead last in opponent scoring rate. I know that the Dolphins are struggling, but Jalen Waddle, Devon Achane, Tua Tagovailoa, they can make plays against a bad defense, and as of late, this Ravens defense has been a bad defense, so I cannot put them in the top 10 this week. Lastly, my stash to get ahead of waivers is the Chicago Bears, who are rostered in just 26% of leagues. They'll get the New York Giants in Week 10. I know the Bears failed to deliver against Tyler Huntley and the Ravens last week, but including that game, over the last 6 weeks, the Bears are still averaging 8.8 fantasy points per game. We're going to see the Giants in Week 9 take the field without Cam Scatterbo, who's now out for the season with a dislocated ankle. So by the time the Bears get the Giants in Week 10, we may see a defeated Giants offense. They already lost Malik Neighbors weeks ago. They could be 2-7 in Week 10, looking at a long offseason ahead of them. So we don't really know what kind of effort or what performance we're going to get from the Giants. So I'm happy to stash the Bears this week and just see how the Giants look in Week 9 before making my decision on whether to start the Bears in Week 10 or not. That's going to do it for this week's episode of Pick 3 DST. As a reminder, click the link below, which will take you to the rankings that I update as the week goes on. And don't forget to like and subscribe to get Pick 3 DST every week, plus all of our football content and fantasy football content over at NBC Sports. Good luck on Sunday.